Welcome back to Mr. Midnight. Tonight we're diving into 7 true horror stories from Alaska's small towns, places so remote that when something goes wrong, there's nobody coming to help. These stories come from real people, mayors, cops, social workers, and regular folks who lived through nightmares in America's last frontier. In these tiny Alaskan towns, some have only one road that closes at night. Others are so far out you can only reach them by plane. And when winter hits, you might be stuck for months with whatever horror finds you. If you're new here, hit subscribe for more true scary stories. Ring the bell so you don't miss our next video. Remember, these aren't made-up tales. These are real accounts from people who discovered that some Alaskan towns hide secrets that should have stayed buried in the ice. So turn off your lights and get ready. We're starting with Whittier, Alaska, a town where everyone lives in one big building, and every single night at 3:47 a.m. something terrible happens that nobody can explain. My name is Robert Haynes, and I've been the mayor of Whittier, Alaska for 22 years. I'm 67 years old now, and in all that time I thought I'd seen everything this town could throw at me. I've handled blizzards that buried our streets in 15 feet of snow. I've managed budget crises when the state cut our funding. I've even dealt with the time our only grocery store burned down and we had to ration supplies for 3 weeks. But I never thought I'd watch my town die because of a sound that shouldn't exist. A sound that comes from inside our walls every single night at exactly 3:47 a.m., driving us all slowly insane. Whittier isn't like other towns. Nearly all of our 272 residents live in one building, Baggage Towers. It's a 14-story concrete structure that used to be Army barracks back in the 1950s. The government built it to house soldiers during the Cold War, thinking Alaska might be where World War III started. When the Army left in the 60s, they sold it cheap, and people moved in because housing in Alaska is expensive. Now it's got apartments, a school, a post office, a church, a health clinic, and a general store all under one roof. In the winter, you can go weeks without stepping outside. We're cut off from the rest of Alaska by mountains on 3 sides and the ocean on the 4th. The only way in or out is through a single tunnel, 2.5 miles long, carved through solid rock. It's shared with the railroad, so cars can only use it at certain times. And here's the thing that makes Whittier feel like a trap. The tunnel closes every night at 10:30 p.m. If you're still in town after that, you're stuck until 6 a.m. the next morning. No exceptions, no emergencies. The tunnel closes and we're sealed in. I've always liked that about Whittier, actually. The isolation, the quiet, knowing all your neighbors, because you literally live in the same building. My wife died 8 years ago, and this community kept me going. Jim Kowalski on the 2nd floor taught me how to smoke salmon. Sarah Jennings and her kids invited me for dinner every Sunday. Danny Morse and I played chess in the lobby every Wednesday night. This place was home. Then in March of 2024, everything changed. The state sent us a new emergency flood siren. Climate change was melting the glaciers faster than expected, and they were worried about tsunamis. Prince William Sound is earthquake country, and a big one could send a wave right at us. The old siren from the 70s didn't work anymore, so they shipped us this new one, a modern digital system with speakers powerful enough to wake the whole building. 2 technicians came on a Tuesday to install it on the roof. Young guys, mid-20s, probably from Anchorage. They bolted the speakers to the roof, ran wiring down through the walls to a control box in the basement, and tested it once around 3 p.m. The sound was so loud it made my teeth hurt. It echoed off the mountains surrounding us and came back even louder. Windows rattled. Car alarms went off in the parking lot. Mrs. Chen's cat ran under her bed and wouldn't come out for 2 days. But it worked. The technicians packed up their tools, drove through the tunnel before it closed, and that was that. We had a working emergency siren. I went to bed that night feeling like I'd done my job, kept the town safe, kept up with state requirements. At 3:47 a.m., I woke up to the sound of the world ending. The siren was so loud I thought my eardrums would burst. It wasn't just sound, it was physical. The walls vibrated. My bed frame shook. I could feel it in my chest, in my bones. The pitch was wrong too, not the steady wail we'd heard during the test, but something that went up and down, like it was screaming. I threw on pants and a shirt, grabbed my phone, and ran into the hallway. Other doors were opening, people in pajamas, people with flashlights, everyone looking scared and confused. "Tsunami!" I shouted over the noise. "Everyone to the top 3 floors! Move!" I started banging on doors, screaming at people to evacuate. Some folks were already heading for the stairwell. Others stood frozen in their doorways. I grabbed Jim Kowalski from the 2nd floor, 81 years old, bad knees, and helped him toward the stairs. "Is this real?" he kept asking, tears running down his face. "My grandkids are in Anchorage. Are they okay?" "I don't know, Jim. We gotta move." The stairwell was chaos. Parents carrying screaming kids. Mr. Peterson dragging his oxygen tank. Mrs. Chen was hyperventilating so badly she wet herself on the stairs, and I had to get 2 people to help her keep moving. Danny Morse's teenage son was having an asthma attack from the stress, gasping for air while his dad tried to find his inhaler. We got everyone to floors 12, 13, and 14 in 12 minutes. 272 people, all accounted for, all huddled together in the hallways waiting for the water to hit. The siren kept going for another 3 minutes, then stopped. We waited in silence. People were crying, praying, holding their kids. I went to a window and looked out at the ocean. The harbor was calm, normal. The water level hadn't changed. There was no wave coming. With shaking hands, I called the state emergency hotline. The woman who answered sounded half asleep. "Sir, no alert was issued tonight. Your siren shouldn't have gone off." "Well, it did. It woke up my entire town. It must be a malfunction. We'll send the technicians back tomorrow to check it." We all went back to our apartments around 5 a.m. Nobody could sleep. Jim Kowalski's wife made coffee for anyone who wanted it, and about 30 of us sat in her living room until sunrise, too wired to go back to bed. The next night at 3:47 a.m. exactly, the siren went off again. This time, people were slower to move, angry, shouting in the hallways that this was bullshit, that someone needed to fix this. But I made everyone evacuate anyway, because what if it was real this time? What if the one time we ignored it was the time the wave actually came? Jim Kowalski clutched his chest halfway up the stairs. His face went gray. We had to stop on the landing while his wife fumbled in her purse for his heart medication. He swallowed the pill and sat there for 5 minutes while the siren screamed, catching his breath, everyone else squeezing past us. When we got to the top floors, people were yelling at me like this was my fault. "You're the mayor. Fix this. Do something. My kids have school tomorrow. They need sleep." Again, no flood. Again, the ocean was calm. The technicians came back the next day. They spent 8 hours checking every wire, every connection, every circuit board. They tested the system a dozen different ways, found nothing wrong. Finally, they disconnected the siren from the power grid entirely, cut the main power cable in the basement, and capped it off. "It's physically impossible for it to go off now," the older one told me. "No power means no sound. If it goes off again, call us immediately, because that would mean someone's manually triggering it, and that would be a crime." That night, I went to bed confident we'd finally get some sleep. At 3:47 a.m., the siren went off, louder than before. I went into the hallway and people were screaming at me. Sarah Jennings was crying, her 2 kids clutching her legs. Danny Morse got in my face, jabbing his finger at my chest. "You said it was fixed. It's not connected to power. This shouldn't be possible." "I don't care about possible. Make it stop." The next morning, I went up to the roof with a bolt cutter. I cut every wire connected to the siren's speaker system. Then I got a hammer and smashed the components until they were just twisted metal and broken plastic. It took me 40 minutes. My shoulders ached for days. That night at 3:47 a.m., the siren sound filled the building, but it wasn't coming from the roof. It was coming from inside the walls. From everywhere and nowhere at once. Every floor simultaneously. The sound echoed through the concrete structure like the building itself was screaming. Jim Kowalski had another heart attack, worse this time. His wife was screaming over his body while 3 of us did CPR in the hallway. We got him stable, but he looked like a corpse. Pale, sweating. His eyes were wrong, unfocused, like he was looking at something far away. At dawn, I called the state police and demanded they send someone immediately. I didn't care about tunnel schedules or weather. This was an emergency. 2 troopers arrived around noon. I showed them video recordings residents had made on their phones. The siren sound was clear, undeniable, but there was something else in the recordings. Something underneath the main sound. A kind of voice. Lots of voices. Screaming. The troopers searched the building for hidden speakers, checked every room, every closet, every maintenance space. Found nothing. The younger trooper, a guy named Mills, went down to the basement. He came back up 20 minutes later, his face white. "There's a door down there, welded shut, old army markings." I'd lived in this building for 22 years and never noticed that door. It was in a corner of the basement behind the furnace, covered in dust. The welding was old, from decades ago. Faded stencil letters said restricted and authorized personnel only. Mills put his ear against the metal and his expression changed. "I can hear it, the siren, very faint. It's coming from behind this door." We brought down welding equipment from Danny Morse's workshop. It took an hour to cut through. When the door finally opened, cold air rushed out. Air that smelled like mold and old paper and something else. Something like fear. Behind the door was a concrete hallway with peelings, GT paint, and broken lights. At the end was a bunker, an underground room I'd never known existed in all my years here. Inside, we found old computers from the 1960s, monitoring equipment with dials and switches, and filing cabinets full of documents. Everything was covered in dust, but the papers were readable, stamped on every page, classified and psychological research division. I started reading, and my blood went cold. From 1964 to 1967, the Army ran experiments on soldiers stationed in this building. They called it auditory trauma conditioning. They subjected soldiers to random alarm sounds at unpredictable times, day and night, no pattern, no warning. They were studying stress responses, sleep deprivation, mental breakdown. The reports got worse as I kept reading. Soldiers began hallucinating after 3 months, seeing things, hearing voices. 3 attempted suicide. 7 died. 4 successful suicides, 3 from stress-induced heart attacks during the alarms. The final page was dated November 1967. It said the experiment was terminated due to persistent anomalous audio phenomena manifesting after subject deaths. The sounds continued even after all equipment was dismantled and destroyed. The document recommended the bunker be sealed because the building itself appears to have retained the trauma. I felt sick. Our home was built on top of a torture chamber. We sealed the bunker back up, but that night at 3:47 a.m., the siren went off again, even louder. And this time it didn't stop after a few minutes. It went on for an hour straight. People were sobbing. Children were screaming. Someone threw a chair through their window trying to escape the sound, and the cold March air came flooding in. By morning, 12 families had packed everything they owned into their cars. The moment the tunnel opened at 6 a.m., they drove away and never came back. Over the next more families left. Young couples with kids mostly. People who could start over somewhere else. People who had options. Jim Kowalski died 3 weeks later. His 3rd heart attack happened during the siren, and this time we couldn't save him. At his funeral, only 180 people came because nearly 100 residents had already left Whittier. The ones who stayed are mostly elderly like me, people who've invested everything here, people who have nowhere else to go. Our retirement savings are in these apartments, and now they're worthless. You can't sell a home in a building that tortures you every night. Every single night at 3:47 a.m., the siren goes off, sometimes for 5 minutes, sometimes for an hour. We've learned to just lie in bed with pillows over our heads. We don't evacuate anymore. We just endure it. I've watched my neighbors age 10 years in 6 months from the sleep deprivation. Sarah Jennings started having seizures from the stress. Danny Morse's son developed a stutter and can't finish sentences anymore. Mrs. Chen hasn't left her apartment in 2 months. She has food delivered to her door and won't answer when we knock. I tried to get the state to relocate us, to declare the building uninhabitable. They said without a proven physical cause, they can't justify the expense. The documents from the bunker disappeared. The troopers said they were taken by federal agents for national security review. A reporter came from Anchorage to do a story. She stayed one night in the guest room on the 3rd floor. At 6 a.m., she was packed and in her car, her face pale, her hands shaking. Her article was never published. Last month, the Johnsons' teenage daughter tried to kill herself. She left a note saying she couldn't take the siren anymore, that she heard the voices underneath, that they were calling her name. She survived, and the Johnsons left the next day, even though it meant losing everything they owned. We're down to 143 residents now. I think Whittier will be a ghost town in 2 years, because the building remembers what was done here. The Army broke something in this place, took terrified soldiers and tortured them until some of them died, and that suffering soaked into the concrete. Now it replays every night at 3:47 a.m., the exact time the experiments always began. And we're trapped. Trapped between the mountains and the sea. Trapped in a building that won't let us forget. Trapped in a town accessible only through a tunnel that closes at night, sealing us in with our nightmares. I'm the mayor. I'm supposed to protect these people, but I can't protect them from walls that scream, from a history that won't stay buried, from trauma that lives in the structure itself. Last night during the siren, I heard something new underneath the sound. Words, dozens of voices, overlapping, desperate. Help us. Please help us. It won't stop. Make it stop. I think they're the soldiers. Still here, still trapped in that moment of terror from 60 years ago. And I think they're trying to take us with them. My name is Janet Reeves, and I've been an Alaska State Trooper for 12 years. I'm 38 years old, stationed in Valdez, and I've worked everything from traffic stops to domestic disputes to search and rescue in the mountains. I've pulled people from car wrecks in sub-zero temperatures. I've chased drunk drivers down icy highways, and I've talked down angry men with guns pointed at their own heads. I thought I'd seen every kind of human behavior, every shade of desperation and violence. But what happened on October 15th, 2023, on a cold afternoon on the Richardson Highway, showed me something that keeps me awake at night. It showed me that sometimes the person screaming for help is telling the truth, and sometimes believing victims means destroying innocent people. And there's no way to know which is which until it's too late. Valdez is a small port town, about 4,000 people, squeezed between mountains and Prince William Sound. It's beautiful here. The kind of beautiful that makes tourists take 1 million photos. But it's isolated too. We're surrounded by wilderness, and in October the days get short and the weather gets mean. Rain turns to sleet, sleet turns to snow, and the mountains trap the cold air in the valley. The sun sets early and rises late, and sometimes it feels like we're living in a different world from the rest of Alaska. I work out of the Valdez post with my partner Derek Chen. He's 29, been a trooper for 5 years, good guy, steady. We handle everything because we're a small department. One day you're doing paperwork about a stolen fishing boat, the next day you're responding to a bear breaking into someone's garage. It's quiet work most of the time, which is how we like it. October 15th started normal. It was a Sunday, cold, 33 degrees, and rain had been falling since morning. Derek and I were at the station doing route-to-roars. E-ports when the call came in at 3:17 p.m. A motorist had called 911 about a jumper on the bridge over Mineral Creek, about 5 miles out on the Richardson Highway. The bridge isn't huge, maybe 40 feet above the creek. Not high enough to guarantee death, but high enough to kill you if you land wrong on the rocks. We've had 2 jumpers there in the past decade. One survived with a broken back. One didn't survive at all. Derek and I got in the cruiser and drove out, lights on, moving fast but careful on the wet road. My stomach was tight like it always is on these calls. Jumper situations are bad. You're racing against time, trying to build trust with someone who's already decided to die, and one wrong word can push them over. We got there in 8 minutes. There was one car pulled over on the shoulder, the motorist who'd called it in, a retired guy in his 60s who looked shaken. He pointed at the bridge and said, "He's still there. He hasn't jumped yet." I looked. There was a man standing on the outside of the bridge railing, holding on with both hands, looking down at the rocks and water below. He was wearing jeans and a flannel shirt, no jacket even though it was freezing and rain was coming down harder now. I radioed for backup and requested the mental health crisis team, then got out of the cruiser slowly. Derek stayed back to control traffic and keep the motorist away. I approached the bridge with my hands visible, keeping my voice calm. "Hey," I called out. "I'm Janet. What's your name?" He didn't look at me, just kept staring down at the creek, at the rocks and the gray water rushing past. His hands were white from gripping the railing so hard. "My name is Ryan Hodges," he said. His voice was shaking. "And I didn't do anything wrong." "Okay, Ryan," I said, moving a little closer, but not too close. "I believe you. Nobody's saying you did anything wrong. We just want to help you. Can you tell me what's going on?" That's when he turned his head and looked at me. His eyes were wide, filled with absolute terror. Not sadness, not depression. Terror. "She's going to say I hurt her," he said. "But I didn't. I swear to God I never touched her." I felt my training kick in. Keep him talking, keep him focused, build rapport. "Who's going to say that, Ryan?" I asked. "My girlfriend Emma," he said. "She's at our house right now, and she's going to tell you I beat her. But I didn't. I would never hurt her. I loved her." Derek was listening on the radio. I saw him step away and quietly call for units to do a welfare check at Ryan's address. "What happened?" I asked. "Why do you think she'd say that?" Ryan started crying, but he kept holding on to that railing. "Because I told her I wanted to break up, and she said if I left her, she'd ruin my life. I didn't believe her, but she meant it. She really meant it." "Where do you live, Ryan?" "Mills Avenue," he said. "The blue rental house, number 447. I could hear the fear in every word. "I loved her," he said again. "I took care of her. But she has problems. She gets so angry. And now she's going to destroy me. Nobody will believe me." I kept talking to him, asking gentle questions, trying to build trust. The rain was soaking through my uniform, and my hands were going numb, but I didn't move. 15 minutes passed. 20. Ryan kept crying, kept saying he didn't hurt her, kept saying no one would believe him. Then my radio crackled, one of the units at Ryan's house. "We've got a victim here," the officer said. "Female, badly beaten. She's conscious. Medics are on scene." My whole body went cold, not from the rain. "Ryan," I said, my voice harder now. "Emma's safe. She's getting medical help. You need to come over the railing right now so we can talk about this." His face changed. The fear turned into something else. Anger. Betrayal. His face twisted up and he screamed, "I fucking knew it! I knew she'd lie! I knew no one would believe me!" "Ryan, please. She did this to her, say." "Oof!" he yelled. "She's crazy. She—" And then he just let go. I ran to the edge. Derek ran too. We looked down and my heart dropped. Ryan had missed the water. He'd hit the rocks at the creek's edge and he was lying there at a terrible angle. We scrambled down the embankment, slipping on wet leaves and mud. Ryan was conscious. He was moving. His left leg was bent wrong, completely wrong, and bone was sticking out through his jeans. Blood was pooling under his head, mixing with the rain. But he was talking. He grabbed my arm with a bloody hand and his eyes were desperate. "Check the cameras," he kept saying. "I have a camera. Check the cameras, please. She did it to herself." The ambulance arrived. The EMTs stabilized him, said he had a broken leg, possible spinal injury, possible skull fracture. They loaded him onto a stretcher and took him to Providence Valdez Medical Center. I went to interview Emma. At the hospital, Emma Sinclair was being treated for her injuries. Her face was swollen, purple and red. Her lip was split. 2 broken ribs. Defensive wounds on her arms. Bruising around her neck and the pattern of hands. I took her statement in the hospital room. She was crying, shaking, barely able to talk through the pain. She said Ryan had been abusive for 6 months, started with yelling, then pushing, then hitting. That morning she'd told him she was leaving, and he'd exploded, beat her badly. She'd barely escaped by locking herself in the bathroom. When she came out, he was gone. She showed me photos on her phone. Previous bruises, injuries from weeks and months ago that she'd documented but never reported because she was afraid. It was a clear case. I'd seen it 100 times. Abuser loses control, hurts his victim, then threatens suicide to manipulate everyone and avoid consequences. Classic domestic violence pattern. I was preparing to charge Ryan with felony, assault and attempted murder based on the neck bruising. Then Detective Mike Chen found me in the hallway. He looked sick. "Janet," he said, "you need to see something." He'd gone to Ryan's house to collect evidence. He'd found a security camera Ryan had installed in the living room, pointed at the front door for burglaries. Mike showed me the footage on his laptop right there in the hospital hallway. The video showed Emma and Ryan arguing that morning, both of them yelling. Ryan was pacing, pointing his finger, clearly angry, but he never touched her. He stayed 3 feet away the whole time. Then Emma picked up a ceramic lamp from the side table, and she smashed it into her own face. I felt like I couldn't breathe. She did it again and again, hitting herself in the face while screaming, "Stop hitting me, Ryan, please stop." Ryan lunged forward to grab her arms to stop her, and she screamed louder, "Don't touch me! Somebody help!" The video showed Emma throwing herself against the corner of the dining table, against the wall, hitting her own ribs and arms deliberately, methodically. Ryan was crying, begging her to stop. "Please, Emma, please don't do this." She picked up a belt and wrapped it around her own neck and pulled. Then she called 911. Ryan stood there for maybe 10 seconds in complete shock, and then he ran out of the house. We arrested Emma at the hospital. She confessed immediately, said Ryan wanted to break up and she couldn't let him leave, so she made sure he'd regret it. By the time we got back to check on Ryan, he was out of surgery. The fall had fractured 3 vertebrae and severed his spinal cord. He's paralyzed from the waist down, permanently, for the rest of his life. Emma got 5 years for filing a false police report and assault. 5 years. That's what beating yourself up and destroying an innocent man's life gets you. Ryan tried to kill himself because he knew no one would believe him. And he was right to be terrified. Because our system is built on believing victims, and it should be. We have to believe victims because too many real victims have been ignored and hurt and killed. But sometimes the victim isn't who we think. Now, a man is in a wheelchair forever because he was so afraid of being falsely accused that he'd rather die. And I think about that every single day when I take a domestic violence call. I second-guess myself now. Every call, every victim statement, every abuser's denial. And that uncertainty eats at me. Maybe one day that hesitation will make me pause when I shouldn't. Maybe I'll second-guess a real victim and someone will get hurt because I'm not sure anymore. There's no good answer, no way to win. Just tragedy on top of tragedy. That's the real horror. Not ghosts, not monsters. Just the fact that sometimes doing the right thing means destroying an innocent person, and sometimes the person screaming the loudest is the one lying, and you can't know until it's too late. I still drive past that bridge every week, and every time I see it, I think about Ryan Hodges standing on the wrong side of the railing, knowing the truth and knowing no one would believe him. And I wonder how many other people are out there right now, trapped in the same nightmare, with no way out. My name is Marcus Webb, and I've been working the North Slope oil fields for 28 years. I'm a driller. That means I operate the machinery that punches holes thousands of feet into the Arctic permafrost, looking for oil. It's brutal work. The slope sits above the Arctic Circle, where winter means complete darkness for months and temperatures drop so low that diesel fuel turns to gel in the lines and exposed metal can shatter like glass. I've seen tough men cry from the cold. I've seen equipment fail in ways that shouldn't be possible. But I'd never seen anything like what happened at Site J7 in January 2024. I'm 52 now, and before that winter, I would have told you I'd seen it all. I started on the slope when I was 24, fresh out of technical school, thinking I'd work a couple years and move on. But the money's good, really good. And somehow those couple years turned into nearly 3 decades. 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off, living in company housing at the Dead Horse Base Camp. My wife got used to me being gone. My kids grew up with a father who was only home half the time. That's the trade-off. In early January, our company opened a new drilling site about 30 miles from main camp. They needed experienced crews willing to work the remote location. The pay was an extra $800 a week, and I volunteered. At 52, with retirement maybe 10 years away, I figured I should bank as much as I could. I'd done remote sites before. It was just more isolation, more darkness, more cold. Nothing I couldn't handle. Site J7 had housing for 12 workers, all modular buildings connected by heated corridors. We had a kitchen, sleeping quarters, a medical room, equipment storage, and a drilling operations office. Modern and comfortable compared to the old camps I'd worked in my 20s. My crew flew in by helicopter on January 3rd because the ice road wasn't finished yet. 12 of us total. Me, 7 other drillers, a cook named Eddie, a medic named Steve, and our site supervisor, Paulson. The first 5 days were completely normal. We worked 12-hour shifts, drilling through permafrost and rock, hitting our depth targets. The rig operated smoothly, a Titan 450 drilling system, one of the newer models with computerized monitoring. We'd drill during our shifts, then gather in the kitchen for dinner. Eddie was a good cook, better than most camp cooks. We'd eat, play cards, tell the same old oil field stories we'd all heard 100 times. It was standard remote site life, boring, exhausting, but steady. On the morning of day 6, Eddie made breakfast like always. Eggs, bacon, toast, coffee strong enough to strip paint. We all showed up except Travis, one of the younger drillers. He was 26, been on the slope for 3 years. Good worker, reliable. When he didn't show for breakfast, I volunteered to check on him. I walked down the heated corridor to the sleeping quarters and knocked on Travis's door. No answer. I knocked again, called his name. Nothing. I opened the door. Travis was sitting on his bed, fully dressed in his work clothes. He was staring straight ahead at the wall. His eyes were open, but they were empty, like looking at a mannequin. I said his name. He didn't react. I walked closer, waved my hand in front of his face. Nothing. No blink, no movement, no acknowledgement that I existed. I got Steve, our medic. Steve had been a paramedic in Anchorage before taking this job, so he knew his stuff. He examined Travis, checked his pulse, his breathing, his pupils. Physically, Travis was fine. Heart rate normal, breathing normal, no signs of injury or illness, but he was completely unresponsive. Steve said it looked like a catatonic episode, some kind of acute psychiatric break. He said we needed to evacuate Travis to a real hospital immediately. But when Paulson called for helicopter extraction, the weather had turned. Visibility was 0, winds gusting to 40 miles per hour. Helicopter couldn't fly, not for at least 48 hours, they said, maybe longer. We moved Travis to the medical room and Steve stayed with him, monitoring his vitals. The rest of us went back to work, but everyone was unsettled. You don't expect a healthy 26-year-old to just stop working like a broken machine. That night at dinner, Paulson started acting strange. He pushed his plate away and stared at Eddie with this intense, paranoid look. Then he stood up and accused Eddie of poisoning the food. Eddie laughed at first, thought it was a joke. But Paulson wasn't joking. He picked up his plate and smashed it on the floor, screaming, "You're all trying to kill me, I know what you're doing." Then he ran to his office and locked himself inside. We could hear him through the door, pacing back and forth, talking to himself. 2 men down in 1 day. The rest of us sat in the kitchen, looking at each other, nobody knowing what to say. I woke up at 4 in the morning to someone screaming in the hallway. I ran out of my room and found Kowalski, one of the other drillers, scratching at the corridor walls with his fingernails. His hands were bleeding, nails torn, leaving red streaks on the white walls. He was saying, "They're inside the walls. Don't you hear them? They're talking about us. They're planning something." 3 of us had to hold him down while Steve sedated him with medication from the emergency medical kit. We carried Kowalski to the medical room and laid him next to Travis. Now we were down to 9 functional people out of 12, and it had only been 7 days. Steve said it had to be environmental, carbon monoxide poisoning, a gas leak, something contaminating our air or water. We tested everything. The air quality monitors read normal. We took water samples, clean. We checked every gas line in the facility with electronic detectors. No leaks. Every tonnage. Hing came back normal. But 3 men had lost their minds in less than 48 hours. By day 8, 6 of the original 12 were either catatonic or violently psychotic. The remaining 6 of us, me, Steve, 2 drillers named Jackson and Mills, Eddie the cook, and 1 other driller, barricaded ourselves in the kitchen. We pushed tables against the doors. We could hear Paulson in his office talking to himself in different voices, having full conversations with people who weren't there. We could hear some of the others moving around in the medical room, the ones who'd become violent, sedated but restless. Steve said, "We need to walk to main camp, 30 miles. We'll freeze, but it's better than staying here and going insane like them." Jackson, a big guy from Texas, shook his head. "It's minus 58 with wind chill. We'll die out there before we make it halfway." We argued for hours. And that's when I heard it. It came through the heating vents, a low humming sound so deep it was almost below hearing. But once I noticed it, I couldn't stop hearing it. It vibrated in my chest, made my teeth ache, created pressure behind my eyes. I mentioned it to Steve, and he went pale. "Low-frequency sound," he said quietly. "Infrasound. It can cause psychological symptoms, anxiety, paranoia, hallucinations. If the frequency's low enough, it can even cause psychosis." We tried to find the source, but it seemed to come from everywhere, from the building itself, from the ground beneath us. The drilling rig was silent. We'd shut it down days ago. But the humming continued, steady and relentless. That night, Eddie had his break. He grabbed a kitchen knife and went after Mills, screaming that Mills was a demon wearing human skin. We wrestled the knife away from him and locked Eddie in the walk-in freezer storage. We didn't know what else to do. Now it was just 4 of us, me, Steve, Jackson, and Mills, and I could feel it starting in my own head, paranoia creeping in like cold through a crack, seeing movement in corners where nothing moved, hearing whispers that weren't there. The humming in my chest, constant, maddening. Steve looked at us with desperate eyes. "We leave right now, all 4 of us, or we'll all end up like them right now." We bundled up in every layer we had: thermal underwear, insulated coveralls, Arctic parkas, face masks, 3 pairs of gloves each. At 2 in the morning, we stepped outside into minus 58 degrees with 20-mile-per-hour winds. The darkness was absolute except for our headlamps. We started walking south toward main camp, 30 miles through frozen tundra. After maybe 5 miles, Jackson collapsed in the snow. "I can't feel my feet," he said. "I can't feel my hands." We tried to get him up, but he was 240 pounds and we were exhausted, frostbite already setting into our fingers. Jackson pulled off his face mask. His lips were already turning blue. "Leave me," he said. "You have to keep going. I'm done." We built him a windbreak out of our empty packs and extra clothes. Jackson looked at me and said, "Tell my wife I love her. Tell my kids I tried." Steve, Mills, and I kept walking. I was crying, but the tears froze on my face instantly. 3 miles later, Mills started talking to someone who wasn't there, having full conversations with his dead brother. He said, "Tommy's here, he's going to help us, he knows the way." Then Mills walked off into the darkness, following something only he could see. We tried to stop him, but he shoved us away and vanished into the Arctic night. It was just me and Steve. We walked for 8 more hours, stopping every 30 minutes to check each other for frostbite. My toes were numb. My fingers wouldn't bend. I started seeing things too. Lights in the distance that disappeared when I looked directly at them, people walking alongside us who weren't there. Steve kept me focused, made me recite my kids' names, my address, anything to keep my mem, and working. At 11 in the morning, we saw lights that were real. Main camp. We stumbled through the gate and collapsed. They got us to medical immediately. I had severe frostbite on 3 toes on my left foot and all the fingers on my right hand. Steve had frostbite on both feet and his nose. Once the weather cleared, they sent a helicopter rescue team to Site J7. They found all 8 men still there. Travis and 3 others were still catatonic, staring at nothing. Paulson and 2 others were violent, had to be sedated and restrained. Eddie was hypothermic in the freezer but alive. He'd been in there for 6 hours. They found Jackson where we'd left him, frozen to death, sitting upright against the windbreak. In his final moments, he'd used his finger to write in the snow, "Tell my kids Daddy fought hard." They never found Mills. Search teams looked for 3 days but found no trace. He'd walked into the Arctic and vanished. Engineers investigated the site. They discovered our drilling had fractured a deep rock formation. The fracture released natural gas mixed with infrasound resonance from the geological structures, sound below 20 hertz, the same frequency that resonates with human eyeballs and causes visual hallucinations. Combined with trace carbon monoxide from the gas leak, it created the perfect conditions for mass psychosis. All 12 of us were medically retired. I lost 3 toes. They turned black and had to be amputated. Steve lost parts of 4 toes and the tip of his nose. Travis never fully recovered. He's in a care facility in Anchorage, still mostly nonverbal. Paulson spent 8 months in psychiatric care. Jackson's family sued the company for wrongful death and won $4.3 million. Mills was declared legally dead after 6 months. His body never recovered. The company shut down Site J7 permanently and sealed the wells. They paid us all off and made us sign non-disclosure agreements. But I'm breaking that NDA now because people need to know. The oil companies are drilling deeper and deeper, fracturing formations we don't understand. There are things in the earth that shouldn't be disturbed, frequencies and gases that can destroy human minds. I still hear that humming sometimes, even though I know it's not real. I'll be watching TV or making dinner and suddenly it's there, in my chest, making my teeth ache. My wife says I wake up screaming 3 times a week, saying, "They're in the walls." I can't be in enclosed spaces anymore. I had a panic attack in an elevator and now I take stairs everywhere. My kids are scared of me because I flinch when they touch me unexpectedly. Jackson's wife, Maria, called me last month, crying, asking if her husband suffered. I lied and said no. But the truth is, I can still see his blue lips and that message in the snow. I'm 52 years old. I should have 15 more good working years, but instead, I'm disabled, medicated, and broken. I have nightmares where I'm back in that building, hearing the humming, watching my friends lose their minds. And the worst part is knowing that right now, today, there are crews at remote sites all over the North Slope, drilling into the frozen earth. Some of them are going to hit the same thing we did. They're going to go through the same hell, and their companies will cover it up too, because oil is worth more than human sanity. And the Arctic keeps its secrets until you dig too deep. Then it makes you pay. My name is Paula Martinez, and I've been a bush pilot in Alaska for 22 years. I fly a Cessna 206, hauling supplies, mail, and passengers to villages so remote that if I don't show up, people don't eat. I've flown through whiteouts where I couldn't see my own wingtips, landed on ice strips with crosswinds that would ground most pilots, and put down on gravel bars when engines coughed and died at 8,000 feet. I know every mountain pass in the Brooks Range, every emergency landing spot between Fairbanks and the Arctic coast. I've earned my reputation as someone who gets the job done, no matter what. But what happened in November 2023 taught me that some routes aren't meant to be flown, and some things in Alaska were here long before we built our villages and airstrips. The call came in on a Tuesday morning, early November. The village of Anaktuvuk Pass needed an emergency supply run. Their regular pilot had canceled, something about weather, but when I checked the forecast, it looked perfect. Clear skies, light winds, good visibility. Anaktuvuk Pass sits right in the middle of the Brooks Range, population around 350, the only permanent settlement in that whole stretch of mountains and tundra. They're completely cut off except by air, no roads in or out. I loaded up the Cessna with 300 pounds of mail, medical supplies, and boxes of food. Standard run. I'd flown to Anaktuvuk Pass maybe 40 times over the years. The flight takes about 90 minutes from Fairbanks, and I took off around 10 in the morning with a full fuel load and coffee still warm in my thermos. The first hour was beautiful. November in Alaska means the sun barely climbs above the horizon, but the light turns everything gold and purple. The mountains looked peaceful below me, snow-covered peaks stretching forever. My instruments were all green, engine purring, smooth at 75% power, GPS showing me right on course. I was making good time. About 20 minutes out from Inuktitut Pass, I started seeing something on the tundra below. At first, I thought it was a caribou herd. The caribou migrate through this area, massive herds sometimes numbering in the thousands. But caribou migrate in August or September, heading from their summer ranges to winter feeding grounds. It was November. They should have been long gone. I dropped down to about 500 feet to get a better look. That's when I realized these weren't caribou. They were too big, way too big. Each one looked the size of a horse, maybe bigger. And they weren't on 4 legs. They were walking upright, on 2 legs, like people. Except they were covered in dark fur, and even from 500 feet up, I could see their proportions were all wrong. Arms too long, hanging almost to their knees. Heads too large for their bodies. Shoulders massive and hunched. I counted maybe 2,000 of them, all walking in a single file line that stretched for miles across the tundra, moving from north to south. They were spread out, maybe 10 or 15 feet between each one, following some invisible path across the frozen ground. My hands got cold on the controls. I keyed my radio. Inuktitut Pass. This is November 7-3 Charlie. Papa, about 20 miles north. You got eyes on the activity on the tundra? Large animals moving south? There was a pause, longer than normal for radio traffic. Then a woman's voice came back, tight and scared. 3 Charlie Papa, this is Ruth at Inuktitut Pass. Yeah, we see them. You need to land quickly. Don't look at them too long. Don't get their attention. What are they? I asked, still circling, unable to look away. The elders call them Tornet, Ruth said. They migrate through every few years. Just let them pass. Land no, you please. I'd never heard of Tornet, but Ruth sounded genuinely frightened, and I'd known her for years. She wasn't someone who scared easy. I leveled out and headed for the airstrip. As I descended on approach, some of the creatures looked up at my plane. I got a good look at their faces. They were almost human, but not quite. Flatter, with heavy brow ridges and wide mouths. Their eyes tracked my plane as I flew overhead. Those eyes were too intelligent, too aware. I felt like I was being studied. I landed and taxied to the small terminal building, really just a metal shed with a windsock. Several villagers rushed out before I'd even shut down the engine. They were moving fast, panicked almost, yanking open my cargo door and pulling out boxes. A young Inupiat man grabbed my arm as I climbed out. You need to leave before dark, he said. Don't stay here tonight. My flight plan has me leaving in an hour anyway, I said. What's going on? Ruth came out, a heavy woman in her 60s wearing a parka with wolf fur trim. She helped unload while she talked. The Tornet are ancient, she said. They were here before humans. They migrate from the Arctic coast south every 7 to 10 years. This is their route. They don't usually bother us if we leave them alone, but if you get too close or get in their way. She didn't finish. What happens? I asked. They take people, Ruth said quietly. Last time they came through in 2016, 2 hunters disappeared. We found them 3 days later, alive but changed. They couldn't speak anymore, just made sounds, like animals. They died within a week. A chill went through me that had nothing to do with the November cold. The village elder, a man named Samuel, came over. He was maybe 80, face weathered like old leather, eyes sharp and clear. You saw them from your plane? Yes, sir. Then they saw you too. You smell different, fuel and metal. They'll be curious. He pointed east. Don't fly directly over them on your way back. Take a different route, even if it adds time. I promised I would. We finished unloading. In maybe 15 minutes, everyone working in tense silence. I did my pre-flight check faster than normal, hands shaking a little as I tested control surfaces and checked fuel sumps. That's when I saw one of them. It was standing at the edge of the airstrip, maybe 100 yards away. at least 8 feet tall, covered in thick, dark hair that was almost black. It was just standing there, perfectly still, staring directly at me. Its eyes were too human, too knowing. I felt like it was evaluating me, deciding something. I climbed into the cockpit and ran through my checklist at triple speed. Started the engine, ran up the RPMs, checked mags, everything by the book, but as fast as I could. The Tornet didn't move, just watched. I took off and climbed, banking south and east like Samuel had told me. As I turned, I looked back and saw dozens more Tornet had stopped their migration. They were all standing still, all looking up at my plane, watching me leave. I took a route that added maybe 20 minutes to my flight, swinging wide to the east, away from their migration line. My hands were steady on the controls, but my heart was pounding. I kept telling myself I'd just fly home, file my report, and never think about this again. 30 minutes into the return flight, my engine started running rough. It started with a slight hesitation, a momentary loss of power. Then it happened again, worse. The RPMs dropped from 2,400 to 2,200, then to 2,000. I checked my fuel gauges. Both tanks reading 3/4 full. Oil pressure normal. Oil temperature normal. Electrical system charging correctly. Everything looked perfect on the instruments. But the engine was definitely failing. Fairbanks radio, November 7-3 Charlie. Papa, declaring emergency. Engine failure, losing altitude. I gave them my position. Looking for forced landing site. The tundra below was rough, hummocks and rocks and frozen streams. But I spotted a relatively flat area, maybe a 1/4 mile of decent ground. I aimed for it, configuring for emergency landing. Flaps down, mixture rich, master, switch on, fuel selector both tanks. I came in as slow as I dared and flared just above the ground. The main wheels hit hard, bounced, hit again. The plane skidded and bucked across the frozen tundra, tail wheel slamming down. I stood on the brakes until we finally slid to a stop. I sat there breathing hard, hands still gripping the yoke. Then I started my emergency checklist. I tried restarting the engine. Nothing. Checked every system. Everything looked normal. The engine just wouldn't catch. It made no sense. I was about 40 miles from Anaktivuk Pass, 50 miles from the nearest other village. But I had my emergency locator transmitter, satellite phone, survival gear, and a week's worth of food and water. I called for rescue on the sat phone. They said a helicopter would come at first light, about 10 hours away. The sun was already setting. I ate some trail mix and drank water from my emergency kit. The temperature was dropping fast, maybe 10 below zero outside. I had my Arctic survival suit and sleeping bag, so I wasn't worried about freezing. I settled in to wait, trying not to think about being alone on the tundra. Around 8 o'clock, when it was completely dark, I heard footsteps outside. Heavy footsteps, slow and deliberate, crunching through the frozen ground. I grabbed my flashlight and shined it out the window. 6 of them stood in a circle around my plane. Tornet, maybe 10 feet away from my wingtips, just standing there, staring in at me through the windows. The closest one was massive, maybe 9 feet tall. Its face was clearly visible in my flashlight beam. Deep-set eyes that reflected the light like an animal's, flat nose, wide mouth. Its breath came out in huge clouds of vapor. The fur covering its body was thick and matted, dark brown or black. One of them reached out and touched my wing with one hand. The metal creaked under the pressure. I could see its hand clearly. Fingers too long, nails thick and yellow like claws. They didn't try to get in. They just stood there, watching me. Minutes passed. 5 minutes. 10. I sat frozen in my seat, flashlight beam moving from one face to another. Then they started making sounds. Low humming noises, almost like singing. Deep bass notes that I felt more than heard. The sound made my head hurt, made my vision blur. I felt suddenly drowsy, like I wanted to open the door and step outside, like I needed to go to them. I knew what was happening. They were calling me somehow, luring me out. I fumbled in my flight bag for earplugs, jammed them in my ears and covered my ears with my hands. The humming got louder. I could feel it vibrating through the airplane's frame, through the seat, through my chest. My nose started bleeding. Blood dripped onto my lap, hot and wet. I felt dizzy, nauseous. The humming continued for hours. I kept my hands pressed over my ears, even though my arms ached. I squeezed my eyes shut and tried to think about anything else. My kids, my house in Fairbanks, my first flying lesson. Anything but the sound. I faded in and out. The pain in my head was enormous, like someone driving nails through my skull. At some point, I must have passed out because I woke up to gray daylight streaming through the windows. The Tornet were gone. I looked out and saw massive footprints all around my plane in the frost. Each print was maybe 18 inches long, pressed deep into the frozen ground. There were dozens of them, circling the plane over and over. My face felt wet. I touched my nose and my hand came away bloody. My ears were bleeding too. I looked in the mirror. My eyes were completely bloodshot. The whites turned red. The rescue helicopter arrived at 9:15. The pilot took one look at me and said, "Jesus Christ, what happened to you?" They flew me back to Fairbanks. I spent 2 days in the hospital. The doctor said I had damage to my eardrums, like I'd been exposed to extreme low-frequency sound. They couldn't explain it. Neither could I. Not in any way they'd believe. Meanwhile, mechanics examined my plane. They flew it out a week later. According to their tests, there was nothing wrong with it. The engine started fine. All systems were normal. The lead mechanic called me and said, "Paula, according to everything we can test, this plane never should have failed. I don't know what to tell you." I told my boss what happened. About the Tornet, the emergency landing, the creatures surrounding my plane. He looked at me like I'd lost my mind. "Take a week off," he said. "You were probably oxygen deprived, maybe mild carbon monoxide poisoning. It causes hallucinations." But I know what I saw. I started researching Tornet. I found some anthropology papers about Inupiat and Yupik legends. The Tornet were described as an ancient people who lived in Alaska before humans arrived, giants who were eventually driven out or killed. But the legends say some never left. They just retreated into the mountains in empty places, and every few years they migrate, following routes they've used for thousands of years. 3 weeks after my incident, another pilot reported engine failure in the same area. He managed to glide to an emergency landing at Anaktuvuk Pass. He mentioned seeing large animals on the tundra below. His plane also had no mechanical problems when mechanics examined it. The FAA issued a notice recommending pilots avoid that corridor during November, citing unusual atmospheric conditions causing navigation equipment anomalies. But I know it's not atmospheric, it's the Tornet, and they don't want us in their migration route. I've talked quietly with other bush pilots. Several have stories about that area. Unexplained engine failures, strange sightings. One pilot said he saw a Tornet carrying something over its shoulder, and when he flew closer, he realized it was a caribou, freshly killed. The Tornet looked up at Bowes, his plane, and he said he felt such overwhelming dread that he climbed to maximum altitude and left the area as fast as he could. I don't fly to Anaktuvuk Pass anymore. I've turned down 6 jobs in the Brooks Range. Other pilots are refusing those routes too, making up excuses about weather or maintenance schedules. The villages up there are getting worried because if pilots won't fly to them, they're completely cut off in winter. Last month, a hiker went missing in the Brooks Range. The search team found massive footprints near his abandoned campsite. They never found his body, just his gear scattered across the tundra. I still fly, but I stay away from that corridor now. And when November comes, I watch the weather reports for the Brooks Range, and I remember those faces staring in at me through the windows, those 2 human eyes, that sound that nearly pulled me out into the darkness. The Tornet are still out there, migrating through their ancient routes. This was their land long before it was ours, and sooner or later someone's going to crash in that area and not be found, and we'll mark it as another accident in the vast Alaskan wilderness. But I'll know the truth. My name is Marcus Tomlinson, and I've been a social worker for the Alaska Department of Health and Social Services for 17 years. I work with remote communities, The kind of places you can't reach by road, where people still live off the land like their grandparents did. My job is checking on vulnerable populations, elders who might be isolated, kids in foster care, people with disabilities who need services. I've visited villages where I'm the only outsider they've seen in months. I've dealt with substance abuse, domestic violence, extreme poverty, you name it. But I've always believed that people are the real threat, that the worst things in this world come from humans. What happened in February 2024 in a place called Portlock changed that belief forever. Now I know there are things out there that are older than any village, and some territories belong to them, not us. I'd never heard of Portlock before my supervisor called me into her office on February 8th. She handed me a file and said, "Welfare check. Family with school-age kids moved to an abandoned village 6 months ago. They're not enrolled in any education program." I looked at the file. Portlock, Southern Kenai Peninsula, population 0. I asked why population was listed as 0 if people lived there, and she said, because officially nobody lives in Portlock. The village was abandoned in 1949 and it's been empty ever since. She explained that a group of about 15 to 20 people, off-gridders trying to escape modern society, had moved there last summer. The state found out because someone reported the family with kids, and now I had to go check on them. I did some research that night. Portlock had been a fishing village in the 1920s and 30s, population around 200. According to historical records, everyone just left in 1949, packed up and walked away from their homes, their boats, everything. The records didn't say why. I found that strange, but I've seen stranger things in remote Alaska. People abandon towns all the time. Economic collapse, natural disasters, isolation. I figured Portlock was just another dead village that some idealistic hippies thought they could revive. On February 10th, I took a boat from Homer with a local guide named Pete. The trip was 4 hours of rough, cold water. Pete was in his 60s, weathered face, didn't talk much. About halfway there, he finally spoke up. "You going to Portlock?" I said yes, just a welfare check on some families. He nodded slowly. "People left that place for a reason, you know." I asked what reason. He kept his eyes on the water. "They said something was hunting them, back in the 40s. I laughed, figured he was messing with the city worker. He didn't laugh back. Pete told me the story. In the late 1940s, people in Portlock started disappearing. Loggers wouldn't come back from the woods. Fishermen vanished from their boats. A woman doing laundry by the creek was found torn apart. Bodies kept turning up, ripped to pieces. The locals said it was something that walked upright but wasn't human. The Alutiiq people, the indigenous population, called it Nantinak, half man, half beast. After about a dozen people died or disappeared, everyone just left. Abandoned the whole village overnight. I said it sounded like a Bigfoot story. Pete's hands tightened on the wheel. Bigfoot doesn't tear people apart. And Bigfoot doesn't leave tracks that are human-shaped but 18 inches long. I didn't have a response to that. We rode the rest of the way in silence. We arrived around 2 p.m. Portlock was eerie in the gray afternoon light. Old buildings from the 1940s were still standing, roofs sagging, walls rotting. But among the ruins were new structures, tents, small cabins made from fresh lumber, blue tarps stretched over frameworks. I could see smoke rising from a fire. A man came down to the rocky beach to meet us. He was maybe 40, bearded, wearing Carhartt work pants and a heavy jacket. "You must be the social worker. I'm Aaron Kelly." He seemed friendly, relaxed. I explained why I was there, and he said, "No problem. We've got nothing to hide. Come meet everyone." There were 17 people total, 4 families, 3 single guys. The children were ages 6, 8, 10, and 14. They all looked healthy, dirty, sure, but well-fed and active. The parents were homeschooling them using downloaded curriculum materials. I spent a few hours reviewing their lesson plans, checking their living conditions, talking to the kids one-on-one. Everything seemed fine. These were just people trying to live a different lifestyle, nothing illegal about it. But I noticed something odd. There were no animals, no birds calling, no squirrels chittering, nothing. Just silence, except for the wind and the distant ocean. And everyone kept glancing at the tree line like they were watching for something. Finally, I asked Aaron about it. He went quiet for a moment, then said, "We've had some problems with wildlife. A large animal has been coming around at night." I asked if he meant a bear. "No, not a bear. Something else. Something that walks on two legs." A woman named Sarah interrupted. "Aaron, just tell him, he should know." Aaron sighed. He admitted that 3 people from their original group had left over the past 2 months. They'd said the isolation was too much, but Aaron said that wasn't the real reason. They were scared. Sarah pulled out her phone and showed me photos. Footprints in the mud. They looked almost human. 5 toes, an arch, a heel. But they were enormous. Easily 18 inches long, and the stride between them was at least 6 feet. I suggested it could be someone playing a prank. Sarah shook her head. "We're 60 miles from the nearest town with no road access. Who's pranking us out here?" One of the men, David, said, "It killed my dog 2 weeks ago. It took me to see the remains behind his cabin. His dog, a big husky, had been torn in half. The spine was broken, ribs snapped, like something incredibly strong had just ripped it apart. I suggested they report it to Alaska Fish and Game. Maybe it was a bear after all." David said, "I've lived in Alaska my whole life. I know what bear kills look like. This wasn't a bear." Pete had already left and wouldn't be back until morning. Aaron insisted I stay the night. It wasn't safe to be on the water after dark anyway. They set me up in one of the old village buildings they'd fixed up as a guest house. It had a wood stove, a cot, and a door that locked. I was tired, so around 10 p.m., I lay down and tried to sleep. I heard it just after I'd started to drift off. Footsteps, heavy, deliberate, walking around the building. I sat up, listening. The footsteps were slow, methodical, like whatever was out there was examining the structure. I got up and looked out the window. In the moonlight, I saw a shape moving along the side of the building. It was tall, at least 8 feet. Broad shoulders, covered in hair or fur. It was walking upright, like a human, but the proportions were wrong. Arms too long, torso too thick. The thing stopped and turned toward my window. For a moment, I saw its eyes catch the moonlight. They weren't animal eyes. They were too human, too intelligent. It was looking directly at me, and I had the terrible feeling that it knew exactly what I was thinking. I backed away from the window, my heart hammering. The footsteps continued around the building. Then I heard scratching on the door. Not clawing, scratching, like it was testing to see if the door would open. I'd locked it, thank God, but it was just old wood and a simple latch. If that thing really wanted in, I didn't think the door would stop it. The scratching stopped. Then I heard something that made my blood freeze. A voice, almost human, speaking words I couldn't understand. It wasn't English, but it wasn't animal sounds either. It was language, structured, deliberate. The thing outside my door was speaking to me. I pressed my back against the door and stayed there all night, barely breathing. At dawn, the footsteps finally moved away. When I came out, Aaron and the others were waiting. They looked exhausted, like they hadn't slept either. "You heard it too, didn't you?" Aaron asked. I nodded. Sarah said, "It comes almost every night. Sometimes it just watches. Sometimes it tries to get into buildings." The 10-year-old girl, Emma, said quietly, "It took my cat. I saw it pick up Fluffy and walk away into the forest." I told them they needed to leave. This wasn't safe, especially with children. Aaron said, "We've invested everything in this. We sold our homes to move here. We have nowhere else to go." I raised my voice. "Your lives are worth more than an investment. This thing has killed before." David said, "We know. We found something in the woods last week." He took me and Aaron about 200 yards into the forest. There was a pile of bones. Human bones. Old, weathered, but definitely human. Mixed with them were metal buttons and pieces of rotted fabric, probably from the 1940s. David said, "This is why everyone left, and we should have listened to the stories." When Pete came to pick me up, I told him everything I'd seen. He just nodded. That's the Nantianak. Been here longer than any village. This is its territory. I asked why the state would let people move here if it was dangerous. He looked at me like I was stupid. The state doesn't believe in monsters, son. They believe in bears and accidents. I filed my report the day I got back. I recommended immediate evacuation of the Portlock settlement. I wrote up everything: the footprints, the dead dog, the bones, the sounds at night. My supervisor called me in and said they'd send a team to assess the situation. That was February 12th. The assessment team arrived on February 15th. By then, it was too late. Aaron Kelly was found dead 50 yards from his cabin. His body had been torn apart. Both arms ripped completely off. Chest cavity opened. The other 16 people had fled on their own boats during the night after Aaron was killed, leaving everything behind. The state's official report listed Aaron's death as a bear attack, but I saw the photos before they classified them. His arms hadn't been bitten off. They'd been pulled off, ripped from the sockets. The force required to do that is beyond any bear, and there were bite marks on his torso. The teeth spacing was too wide, the jaw too large. I tried to push for more investigation, but my supervisor told me to let it go. Portlock is abandoned again. That's the end of it. But I couldn't let it go. I did my own research. I found historical records from the 1940s. Between 1943 and 1949, over a dozen people were killed or disappeared from Portlock. Each death was officially attributed to bears or logging accidents. But witness statements from that time described seeing a hairy man near the bodies. The Alutiiq people had warned the settlers not to build there. They said the Nantianak lived in those mountains. Nantianak means the one who stays in the mountains. According to legend, it's territorial and violent. It's not Bigfoot. Bigfoot supposedly avoids humans. The Nantianak actively hunts humans who enter its territory. I found other reports from around the Kenai Peninsula. Hikers gone missing, campers found dead, always in remote areas. Always the same pattern: massive tracks, extreme violence, no explanation that makes sense. The state won't acknowledge it because acknowledging it means admitting there's something out there they can't control or explain. I visited Sarah, one of the survivors, at her new apartment in Anchorage. She was traumatized, barely able to talk about it. But she told me, the night Aro died, I saw it clearly. It was standing in the moonlight. At least 8 feet tall, covered in reddish-brown hair. Its face was almost human. Flat nose, deep-set eyes. When it looked at me, I knew it was intelligent. It knew exactly what it was doing. She paused, tears running down her face. It wasn't killing Aaron for food. It was killing him to send a message: leave. The 4 children from Portlock are all in therapy now, all diagnosed with PTSD. Emma, the 10-year-old, won't go outside after dark. She has nightmares about the hairy man. I still do social work visits to remote villages, but I refuse assignments to the southern Kenai Peninsula. Other workers have reported strange things in that area: livestock killed, strange howls at night, massive tracks. Portlock is abandoned again, and I don't think anyone will ever successfully settle there. The Nantianak is still there, in those mountains, protecting its territory like it has for hundreds or thousands of years. And I know that Aaron Kelly died because people didn't respect the warnings. They didn't believe the legends. They thought they could just move into that cursed place and build a new life. But you can't build anything on land that belongs to something older and stronger than you, something that views humans as invaders. The bones we found in the forest are proof that the Nantianak has been killing people in Portlock for at least 80 years. It will keep killing anyone foolish enough to try to live there. And the state will keep calling them bear attacks or accidents. And people will keep dying. And I'll keep remembering Aaron's torn-apart body and the sound of that voice outside my window, speaking in a language humans were never meant to understand. My name is Jennifer Wu. I'm 34 years old, and I work at a seafood processing plant in Dutch Harbor, Alaska. It's one of the most remote places you can work in America. The island sits way out in the Aleutian chain, surrounded by gray water and gray sky. During fishing season, our population jumps from 4,000 to 8,000 people. Everyone comes for the same reason. The money's good if you can handle the cold. I've been a quality control inspector at Pacific Star Processing for 6 years now. My job is simple. Boats bring in their catch. I check it. If it's good, we process it. If it's bad, they take it back. The work is hard. 12-hour shifts in the cold. Everything's wet. Your hands go numb. But you get used to it. You get used to the smell, too. Fish and crab and salt water. It gets into your clothes, your hair, your skin. In August of last year, a new boat started bringing deliveries to our plant. The Nordic Star. First season fishing out of Dutch Harbor. The captain's name was Lars Johansson. Big guy, maybe 50, with a thick accent. Swedish or Norwegian, I think. He had a crew of 8 men. Their first delivery was fine. Good quality king crab. Proper handling. Everything looked right. But when they were unloading, I noticed something caught in one of the crab pots. It looked like old rope at first. Fishing gear gets tangled up all the time. But when I got closer, I realized it was hair. Long, dark hair. Human hair. I called my supervisor, Mike, over. He took one look and said, "Cut it off and throw it out. Probably from old gear someone lost." Lars was standing on the dock watching us. When I cut the hair free, his face went white. He turned away fast and walked back to his boat. I thought it was weird, but I forgot about it. You see strange things in this job. Fishing gear picks up all kinds of stuff from the ocean floor. 3 days later, the Nordic S. Tar came back. This time, something was really wrong. The crab were all dead. That happens sometimes, holding tank problems, temperature issues. But these crab were dead in a way I'd never seen before. Their shells were cracked open, not from outside pressure, from inside, like something had burst out of them. And the smell. It wasn't the normal dead fish smell. This was different, rotten, wrong. It made my eyes water. I rejected the entire delivery, told Lars his holding tanks must be contaminated. Usually when you reject a catch, captains get angry, they argue, they lose money. But Lars just nodded. He looked scared. Behind him, one of his crew members was crying. Young guy, maybe 20 years old. I asked if he was okay. Lars snapped at me. "He's fine. Just seasick." Then he grabbed the kid's arm and pulled him away. The next day, I was having lunch at the Elbow Room. It's the main bar in Dutch Harbor. Most of the fishing crews go there on their days off. I was eating a sandwich when someone grabbed my arm. It was one of the Nordic Star crew. His name was Tommy. He was drunk. It was 2 p.m. "You work at Pacific Star, right?" he said. "You inspect our crab?" "Yeah," I said. He leaned in close. His breath smelled like whiskey. "Don't get on our boat. Don't ever get on that boat. Something's wrong with it." "What do you mean?" "There's something in the holding tanks," he said. "Living in the water. And Lars won't let us drain them." His hands were shaking. "We've been finding dead crew members from other boats, floating near our fishing grounds. And the water's wrong out there. Things come up in the pots that aren't crab. Lars keeps fishing there anyway." Before I could ask anything else, Lars walked into the bar. He saw us talking. His face got hard. He walked over and told Tommy to shut up. Tommy went quiet immediately. He looked terrified. Lars turned to me. "Tommy's been drinking too much. Don't listen to him." That's when I noticed Lars's hands. They were covered in sores. They looked like chemical burns or bites. A week went by. Kept thinking about what Tommy had said. Then the Nordic Star came back with another delivery. I was assigned to inspect it. When they started unloading, I noticed the crew was different. 3 new guys I'd never seen before. "Where's Tommy?" I asked Lars. "He quit. Went back to Seattle." But the way he said it made my skin crawl. I started checking the crab. That's when I saw them. Mixed in with the normal king crab were things that weren't crab. They looked similar but wrong. Their shells were too smooth, almost see-through. And they had too many legs. 8, 10. I couldn't count them all. Some of them were still moving, twitching, even though they'd been out of water for over an hour. I called Mike over. "What the hell are these?" He stared at them. "I don't know," Maybe some kind of mutation? Deep water species? I told Lars we couldn't accept the delivery. He got angry. Really angry. They're king crab. Just abnormal ones. It happens sometimes. Mike backed me up. We rejected the load. As the crew was loading everything back onto the boat, one of those wrong crabs grabbed my boot. Its claw went through the rubber like it was paper. I felt something sharp stab into my foot. I screamed and kicked it off. Lars ran over with a metal hook and smashed it. He hit it over and over, way more than necessary. The thing made a sound when it died. Not a normal sound. It was almost like a person whimpering. Lars looked at me with real fear in his eyes. Go to the medical center, now. Get that checked. I went to the clinic. The doctor cleaned the wound. It was deep. The edges looked burned. This looks like a venomous sting, she said. But king crab aren't venomous. What actually got you? I didn't know what to tell her. I just said a crab. She gave me antibiotics and a tetanus shot. That night, my foot swelled up. The skin around the wound turned black. The pain was so bad. I couldn't sleep. I went back to the clinic at 4 a.m. They put me on IV antibiotics, said I had a serious infection. They kept me in the hospital for 3 days. During that time, I had dreams. Horrible dreams. I was underwater in complete darkness. Things were swimming around me. They had shapes like people but moved wrong. Too many joints. They bent in ways humans can't bend. And they were singing. Their voices hurt to hear, like metal scraping against metal. The nurses said I screamed in my sleep. Other patients complained. When I finally got discharged, I heard the news about the Nordic Star. The boat had gone back out to sea. They'd missed their check-in times. After 48 hours, the Coast Guard launched a search. They found the Nordic Star drifting about 60 miles south of Dutch Harbor. When the Coast Guard boarded the boat, it was empty. No crew, no bodies, nothing. The engine was still running. Fishing gear was still in the water. There was food on the table like someone had just been eating. But all 8 men were gone. The holding tanks were completely empty, drained. The Coast Guard found drag marks on the deck, like something heavy had been pulled across it multiple times. There was blood, a lot of blood, but no bodies. I know one of the Coast Guard guys. His name is James. He's a petty officer. He told me what they didn't put in the official report. He said the whole boat smelled wrong, like rotting fish, but worse. There were handprints on the walls. Going down into the hold, the handprints were too big to be human, and they had too many fingers. They found scales stuck to the blood, fish scales, but the size of dinner plates. In one of the storage lockers, they found 3 fingers, torn off. But they weren't human fingers. They were longer, webbed between the joints, with black nails like claws. The investigation ruled it crew lost, at sea presumed drowned. They never explained what happened. I told James about the weird crab, about what Tommy had said. James got quiet. We've been getting reports, he said, from other boats, about that fishing ground 60 miles south. Boats that fish there say they see things in the water at night. Large shapes moving under the surface. He told me one crew pulled up a pot with something inside that wasn't crab. They described it as humanoid, but with gills. They threw it back and left that area immediately. Another boat found a body in their nets. When they got close, they realized it wasn't human. It was shaped like a person but covered in scales, webbed hands, a face that was almost human but with a mouthful of needle teeth. They cut it loose and called it in. By the time authorities arrived, it was gone. There's something out there, James said, in the deep water, and fishing boats are getting too close to it. The wound on my foot healed eventually, but I have a scar. It's perfectly circular. It never tans. Sometimes it burns, especially when I'm near the ocean. I still work at Pacific Star, but I refuse to inspect deliveries from boats that fish in that southern area. Management doesn't like it, but I don't care. 3 more boats have gone missing in the past 6 months. Same region. One was found crashed on rocks, completely empty. The other 2 were never found. The company that owned the Nordic Star went bankrupt and shut down. I heard a rumor that Lars survived. Someone said they saw him in Anchorage, living on the streets, talking to himself. I tried to find him, but nobody knew where he was. Part of me doesn't want to know. Tommy's family reported him missing. Police said there was no evidence of anything bad happening. He probably just left Alaska, but I know he didn't leave. I know whatever was in those holding tanks took him. Last month I was walking the docks after my shift. It was dark. I saw something in the water between the boats. It looked like a person, treading water, staring up at me. Its eyes reflected the dock lights, like an animal's eyes. When I stepped closer, it dove under and disappeared. I reported it to Harbor Security. They checked the underwater cameras. Nothing. Other workers at the plant have started refusing to process crab from certain areas. Management is getting frustrated. But we know something is out there, in the deep Aleutian waters. It's not an animal. It's something else. Something old. And the fishing boats are bringing them up, or disturbing them, or maybe feeding them. I think about the Nordic Star crew. 8 men gone without a trace. I wonder if they drowned, or if something took them down into the dark water, down where things with webbed hands and needle teeth wait. Every time I inspect a delivery now, I check for those abnormal crabs, those see-through shells, too many legs, because if they show up again, it means boats are fishing too close to whatever's down there, and more people are going to disappear. Nobody will believe us. Who's going to believe that there are things in the Aleutian waters that look almost human but aren't? Things that have lived in the deep ocean longer than humans have existed? They're down there, in the cold and the dark, and they're hungry.